All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be finishing off the evening with one more panel discussion on the fintech track, discussing PropTech role in shaping the future of the real estate sector. So thank you guys for joining us. We have a great group up here with me tonight. We'll start with some quick introductions and then kick things off with a couple questions. But I'll do just a quick round and introduce the panel here, and then I'll pass it over to them to do a quick introduction of themselves, their company, and we'll kind of kick it from there. So to my left here, we have Kyle Nelson, VP of Corporate Strategy at Snapped. To his left, we have Andy Taylor, CEO of RetroRate. To Andy's left, we have Tal Almog, COO of Bluma AI. And at the end, we have Rich Montano, who's the CEO of Cribsy. So thank you guys all for being here tonight. Excited about this panel and discussion. So first off, maybe I'll just pass it to my left to Kyle to tell us a little bit more about himself and Snapped.
Sure. Yeah. As Steve mentioned, I'm Kyle Nelson, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Snapped. Snapped is an AI-powered fraud detection solution servicing the rental housing ecosystem. We work with 32 of the top 50 NMHC landlords like Greystar, Avalon Bay, Equity Residential, about 2 million units across the United States. We're backed by Insight Partners, raised a Series A with them in 2022. I was the first employee after that raise. And yeah, it's been a good ride so far and happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And Andy, pass it to you.
All right, Andy Taylor, thanks for having me. I'm the CEO of RetroRate, and RetroRate is a company that helps real estate professionals and their clients find assumable loans. So those are the kinds of loans that you can take over. So rather than going out and getting a brand new 7% loan, you can take over someone's 2.75% VA loan. And so we're building technology for real estate professionals like real estate agents, loan officers, things like that. This is kind of coming off the tail end. Just sold my last company to Credit Karma, spent 4 years there, and then in a way former life, I was the head of product of Redfin. So been in the PropTech space for way too long at this point.
I'll take 2.75.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, my name is Tal Almog. I'm the co-founder and COO of Bluma. Bluma is a commercial real estate lending platform. We use technology and automation to automate and simplify the commercial real estate underwriting and portfolio monitoring. So we are kind of in an intersection between PropTech, FinTech, and BankTech. We can be in either one of those panels. We're founded in 2018, backed by Canopy Ventures primarily. First round we got from Flatgate in Silicon Valley. And today on the platform we have like banks like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, regionals like Huntington and Regions, and some local banks. It was actually incubated here in San Diego in ABP Capital and C3 Bank down in Encinitas. That's who we are.
Hi, I'm Rich Montano, CEO of Cribsy. Cribsy is a technology that brings AI and computer vision together to to convert qualitative data into quantitative data. So we actually convert details from images from photos of listings, and we use that data to correlate with values, days on market, things like that. We actually built it internally, and we're actually just now about to go out to the market.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for the introductions. Excited to have you all here. I guess just real fast, myself, I'm Stephen Fay. I'm VP of Partnerships at Plug and Play. We're a global innovation platform and a venture capitalist, so we invest in about 250 early-stage startups each year. So great to be here and great to be hosting this amazing panel tonight. But let's just kick things off and talk about the market overall. I think we've seen a lot of ups and downs since 2021. What are your guys' thoughts on kind of the prospective market leading into 2025 when it comes to real estate and PropTech? And whoever wants to take it first, feel free.
I'm super bullish on PropTech just as a category. I think it's still incredibly early days overall. It's about a 40 billion market by investment volume. And if we look at like FinTech more broadly, it's closer to like 300 billion. So I think there's a lot of runway for PropTech as a category, both on like the buy side, like a lot of these gentlemen represent, as well as the rental side, which Snap plays in. So I think like there's great VCs out there and PE groups like Fifth Wall and MetaProp, Modern Ventures, that are still incredibly early innings. These are firms that are like less than a decade old that have deep, deep roots in PropTech ecosystems with big, big groups like CBRE and Greystar. So overall, I think we're just at the beginning and this category has a lot of runway.
Yeah, I would say like traditionally, PropTech has underperformed what you think of as like the returns in like the general fintech space, and I think a lot of that has to do with like fintech just being really, really hard. And I know that sounds really strange, but like real estate agents haven't changed the way they've worked in like 30 years, 40 years. The GSEs haven't really fundamentally changed. The technology that, even though I worked at a mortgage point of sale, which was my last company, you can almost think of that as just like window dressing on top of this old archaic process, and still under the covers, really everything was just happening exactly the same way. But I think you're starting to see real changes fundamentally in the way that properties are bought and sold and transacted on, and I think that has the potential to really accelerate changes really for good this time.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think that talking about data, right? One thing about PropTech and commercial real estate is that there's no really source of truth. There's so many companies out there like CoStar, Moody's that are doing the research and data, but no data is actually a source of truth, and it all depends on when the data was collected. So one of them can be correct today. If the other one does the survey a week later, they will be correct. So it's very hard, especially when we talk about, and we'll later get into AI, and when you don't have reliable data, that becomes a challenge. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, obviously, the interest rate that we saw, impacted the overall market, PropTech, FinTech. Lending, obviously, in the last year, there were almost no originations by banks. What we saw actually, that's like most originations are now done by debt funds, etc. But the good news is that I think since the start of the year, everyone is already, I think, used to now the interest rates that are going to be kept at what they are today, not waiting and waiting until they will go down. So I think this would give a boost. We're already seeing it on the on the lending side, new construction and new lending. So that's going to be very positive. And last thing that I would say, obviously, office space will continue to be with people working from home now, continue to be a weak asset type. There's, I think in San Diego, the latest that I saw, around 20% vacancy. And that would not change, but will present maybe other opportunities that maybe we'll touch on later.
Well, I'm really excited about PropTech over the next 10 years. I think there's a lot of things coming. I think before in PropTech, we had a lot of people doing things that were just cool, trying to do stuff, using Excel and then creating a nice user interface. I think now we're actually seeing some real technology that's out there. Machine learning has brought us a long way. That's one thing, computer vision, as I mentioned earlier. But I think what the other side of it, though, what's happening now is we're seeing a demand that's actually being created for the technology. So whereas before, let's just use appraisers as an example. Appraisers are very, very focused on their ability to do it themselves, and they don't trust technology. But at this point, if you look back 10 years, we have half as many appraisers in the industry now today than we did 10 years ago, but we have about twice as many appraisals being done. So we have a lot more dependency going into technologies to actually help complete appraisals. So you see more desktop underwriting, you see better valuation systems, better than the Zillows that we know, the Zestimates. So we see a lot more technology out there that's actually filling gaps. And so I think there's going to be more places where we see that. So I'm actually really excited to see what comes from that.
No, I really appreciate that, guys. I think, this kind of just naturally gets us into this next topic of where we naturally see PropTech transforming the industry in the next 5 to 10 years. And you guys touched on a few of these topics. But maybe more specifically, we can start from the rentals perspective with interest rates not changing that much. And as we know, it's, somewhat harder to buy a home. How have you guys seen that affect your side of the business when it comes to rentals?
On the rental side, I think there's still a tremendous amount of undersupply in the market. And so that's breeding a ton of opportunity for large developers. And we mentioned office, and I think it'd be a good opportunity to bring this up. But I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see a ton of office to rental conversions, specifically potentially office to affordable housing conversions. That's specifically an area that is underinvested across the United States. Everyone wants to build a Class A, Class B plus, A minus, rent that's going to get $4.25, $5 a square foot, but no one's looking at subsidized HUD, Section 8, Section 42, where there's really serious demand. And I think that the office market, because we're seeing that 20% vacancy, like you mentioned, that's ripe for potential conversions. While expensive, it could be incredibly lucrative and really service both sides of the market. So I'm not sure if anyone has any thoughts on that topic, but figured it was a good opportunity to bring it up.
No, that's totally okay. Well, no, thank you for the perspective. I think it does make a lot of sense that we are going to see a major shift in vacancy of commercial real estate, and what will we do with that space? How will companies still monetize on it? How will they fill it up? I think we're starting to see some people come back to offices, but also work from home is not going away anytime soon. So, maybe as we kind of shift over to some of your guys' other businesses, how do you guys see your companies, transforming the real estate industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I'd like to think that, a company like ours that is helping people get into homes in a world where basically the entire market is locked up is something that's going to be insanely valuable. And, I think a lot of people say, well, what happens when rates start to drop? And the truth of the matter is, actually, most people are predicting that rates are going to stay about the same, or they're going to even rise, given inflationary pressures and a new incoming administration. So we'll see if that plays out or not. But the truth of the matter is, there's always arbitrage opportunities in the market. Somebody always has a better rate than you do. And if you're looking in a particular region, say like all of San Diego, or even a particular neighborhood or a zip code, there's always something out there that is potentially available to you. So I think this is a matter fundamentally of data. Traditionally, you were talking about the quality of data. Don't even get me started. This is the real estate industry data corpus is built on manual entries. The MLS, which everyone talks about, like on Redfin or Zillow or whatever, that's a real estate agent literally typing something in, potentially trying to game the system so that they think that you're actually in the nice zip code, but really you're in just across the freeway in the bad zip code. Or maybe it comes from a county record and it was literally transcribed from microfiche in some county clerk's office somewhere in nowhere. So finding a good corpus of data just right at the beginning to build upon is critically important.
I think for us at Bluma, something transformative is going to be, people want to transact easier today. A commercial real estate loan is not just like a residential loan. You have to basically look at cash flows and rent rolls, and very complex, and that's why it takes weeks to just screen a deal even, and we now do it in an hour. But other than the efficiency gains, I think what we look for as an opportunity is really connecting buyers, sellers, and lenders. So there's a lot of marketplaces for buying commercial real estate, but we're looking into a marketplace for connecting borrowers with lenders through technology. Because everything is so archaic today, having a technology where you can just go in, it starts. You can see it in the residential side, but it doesn't exist on the commercial side. So now that we're gaining on the lending side, we're ready to open it to investors and borrowers and basically create the Match.com for commercial real estate lending.
Yeah, I think for us, what we're doing is we're building a system for ourselves internally to underwrite and analyze real estate faster. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think I was really clear about it. I said we built it internally. I have a real estate company. We do a lot of investments. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions in San Diego, flipping houses, flipping small apartment buildings. So we built technology internally that we now see there's a demand for it to take it out. So for us, as we take our separate pieces of technology to market, I think what we're going to do is we're going to help investors and real estate buyers, analysts, et cetera, with increasing their bandwidth. So that's, for example, my competitors will look at maybe 10, 20 deals a day. In my office, I'll look at 300 deals a day. And I can do that because I can sort, and my technology does a lot for me before it actually gets to my computer. So I think bandwidth is going to be a big game changer for investors in the future.
I think one thing that we're hearing here too, though, is that these are fundamentally different things that haven't existed in the past. Living in these, converting commercial real estate into rentals, or really fundamentally attacking the core marketplace issues or the core data issues, or I think of Assumable loans as an entirely new financing class that didn't exist before. And you can almost think of it as like in the past, previously a lot of like fintech startups they could ride this really great like zero interest rate environment and not really have to change like the fundamentals of the businesses. But you're seeing these like new businesses that are being born right now that are just totally different than anything that's ever existed in the past. Like just totally approaching it from a different thing rather than just trying to automate the same status quo.
Yeah, I don't know how someone in the 25 to 35-year-old category who makes probably good money, but we're seeing that between inflation, rates, and home values, that's outpacing wage growth exponentially. And so the only path forward is assumable mortgages, right? Like,
absolutely.
I just don't see, otherwise what, those people get pushed to the renter economy and then they're career renters until they die. So it's kind of like morbid thought, but that's the reality for so many individuals.
And you left out like, climate change driven, like homeowners insurance policies.
I think ESG is later in the session, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe on the assumable mortgage side, you can talk about like what would typically someone save by taking on a retro rated mortgage or assumable mortgage?
I mean, it can vary really dramatically. I mean, and we built this thing. It was in house and it had like the stale data, and we just recently lit up like 10 new states, and so it really does vary geographically. But I mean, sometimes you see the perfect trifecta. Someone that could save like $1,800 a month on monthly payments. $1,800 a month. $100 a month is like really great, but $1,800 is fantastic. Then you look at the total amount of interest. So you have a lower interest rate loan, and you're already further down the amortization cycle. So you're saving like $100,000 in total interest. And then finally, sometimes you're in the situation where the amount that you have to put down to actually make the seller whole, that what's called the equity gap, is less than like the 20% that you would put down for a typical loan. So you can save in all three ways, and it's just these gems are out there, and literally nobody knows about them. Most real estate agents don't even know that they're even there. They're selling these homes and not even talking about it. They're talking about high-end appliances and high-end like countertops, and they're not talking about the most important asset that comes with the home, which is the loan. Mm-hmm.
If I could add to that for a second, I think it's really neat what you're doing, because assuming loans has been like kind of a common thing in like commercial, like institutional spaces where you have like these big apartment buildings, $100 million deals, things like that.
We should compare notes.
Right. Well, no, but I think it was interesting though for you, what you're doing, and this is what I think a lot of the technology is doing that we're bringing up, is it's actually bringing these institutional level services down to the consumer. And I think that's one of the big game changers for PropTech. I think that's going to bring consumers more abilities to actually benefit from things like this.
One thing to add, I think, talking about like how hard it is to buy or even rent. So, one trend we're seeing now, a request for almost like a new asset type, which is like, just like you have shared office or shared living. So we know that the founder of like WeWork now has got more money from Andreessen, and but that concept, I don't know if he specifically, but that concept of like shared living, I think, is something that on the lending side, we know lenders like don't know yet like how to look at that asset type, but I think it's going to be something definitely to look at for, especially for young people who want to live like in nice like shared areas, but just like a bedroom, just a hotel, like that can be a good proposition.
There's another concept I don't think we've touched on yet on the buy side, and that's kind of the whole premise of rent to own, right? There's a lot of this that popped up from 2015 to 2020, and I got news for everybody: it doesn't work. Divvy Homes was just sold for parts to Brookfield Properties, unfortunately, and it's sad, right? I really was hoping that trend would catch on, but the models just break. There's too much breakage in the financial models and the backing on that, and so the only other path, as I see it, is assumable or rent. It just doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint for someone to pour their life savings into down payment, taxes, maintenance, utilities, all of that. It doesn't work because, again, it's just outpacing wage growth.
Well, I think, just kind of leading on to that track record, how have you guys been able to scale your guys' businesses or help scale your businesses throughout all this kind of, window shopping that's been going on as this, PropTech industry is still very early. And I know it's speeding up quite quickly now, but, what have helped you guys scale over the past, difficult years here, since we've, had COVID, the boom in 21 and everything of that sort?
So my first startup was a company called Paylease. So we played in the online payment and utility billing category, founded here in San Diego by Ty Kalklosh. And we took a really simple idea of paying rent by check and we took it online. And it was kind of like revolutionary, but that occurred just in 2008? Like, this was not that long ago. And so in 2019, when we founded Snapped, kind of took the same type of premise. Let's take a process of applying to an apartment home and where someone presents pay stubs and bank statements and all these financial documents. And hey, let's check to make sure that they're real. So we ran them through a machine learning model. And guess what? Like 10 to 12% of them are fraudulent. And so we kind of created a category. I like to say like we're the Uber of financial documents for the apartment homes. Not that sexy, but we kind of created this market because, again, PropTech is a laggard of an industry overall. There's so much opportunity for disruption from manual processes, and who thought a business or a category, I mean, our category alone is about $350 million in TAM. Who thought that was a business 10 years ago? And I think we're going to see more and more and more of that over the next 10 years, and the next 10 years beyond that are these simple tasks that happen all through the applicant life cycle, whether it's on the buy side or the rental side, being disrupted by technology and specifically artificial intelligence.
Yeah, maybe Andy, you can talk to this a little bit when it comes to like automation. Your former role of head of product at Redfin. I'm sure you guys had to and have automated a lot of what you guys do today. Leading on what Kyle mentioned.
Yeah,
how do you see
absolutely.
kind of
I think one of the original premises for Redfin was that the agent was going to be replaced, and so a lot of the early technology, and like you can think of as Redfin 1.0, was all about what are the different things that we can do. So let's have an app that is going to display the data and display it beautifully, and that's check, we got that. And maybe you can unlock the doors and you can go tour it on your own. Great, you can do that. And maybe we can automate some of the document collection and maybe give some really good guidance on contract negotiation. Great, check. The problem was that when push came to shove, 99.9% of the time when people wanted to go and actually make an offer, they really, really wanted a big warm hug from the real estate agent. They weren't willing to just do it on their own. Like it was scary, especially first-time homebuyers. Totally different story for like second-time homebuyers. So we turned that into a lot of automation around mortgage document collection from my last startup, Approved, and now we're sort of starting to lean into some of the similar elements for RetroRate. RetroRate is super early, by the way. We have not yet really officially launched. So if you have any real estate agents that want to get involved with this like early on, come find me afterwards.
Yeah, might be able to introduce you to one or two actually.
Fantastic.
Well, Tal, let's go back to the artificial intelligence side. Real fast. I know it's a topic that's talked about a lot lately, but I know you guys are doing some artificial intelligence across Bluma, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's helping you guys transform the PropTech space.
Yeah, so I just actually released a couple of blogs lately about this. We have a challenge because we work with banks, and obviously it's a very conservative market. So, at Bluma, you can just upload any document in any form, rent roll, P&L, offer memorandum. We parse it automatically, and just that data collections can save you, hours of work. Then also, we talked before about we do automated valuations based on models, and it's almost like a pre-appraisal. And one of the funny thing about that is that I was trying to see how our different models actually compare to an appraisal. So when I went and started interviewing, people told me, don't trust the appraisal, that the appraisal themselves are wrong. You might be the correct one because they're just selecting the comp that they want, and you do it more scientifically. So don't try to compare to them because sometimes it's really made up. So, we really believe, and I think that's, Andy talked here about AI is not going to replace people. AI is going to replace tasks that are mundane. I don't think we see at banks they hire a six-figure analyst to what they do most of the day is collecting data, typing in data, copying from a rent roll into a table, in Excel, and that all can be automated. But eventually, we want to present the data to a person to make a decision. And again, in lending, in banks, you cannot even from a regulatory perspective, make decisions for them. So it's really helping people do their work faster so that they can actually, we call it the 80-20 rules today. 80% of the time is used to collect data, type in data, and only 20% of the time is used for actually risk assessing and making a decision, that's going to flip right where you'll be able to do most of it automatically and then spend most of your time on the actual analysis. So that's really in my world.
I mean, you touched on something really important here too, which is the speed at which AI is adopted will be directly proportional to the speed at which the government and GSEs and the entities that regulate this entire industry is able to accept that kind of thing too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, so like, automated appraisals, the only reason that's beginning to take off now is because Fannie Mae is beginning to say, hey, we will allow you to use that for certain types of properties. Yep.
There's an interesting comparison that happened recently in the rental ecosystem on that exact point. The DOJ had a federal probe against a large property management software for price fixing using AI algorithms. A big deal, and several large multinational landlords were named. The criminal probe got dropped, but the civil probe still exists. And I think what we're going to see is a ton of regulations start to appear, FICRA, fair housing, and a bunch in the mortgage space as well, around the use of AI technologies in underwriting, as well as the overall apartment application workflow. Because now the properties that were named in that lawsuit, guess what? They're not using that AI algorithm anymore. They're calling comps. They're using practices from 1980 because they can no longer rely on those algorithms because guess what? They've been informed by mistaken models. So I think we're going to see Papa regulation come home to roost a little bit. And while we may speed up, we may eventually have to speed up to slow down and vice versa.
Rich, did you want to add anything else to the automation AI side of things?
Yeah, sure. What we did, we were analyzing properties to figure out if we want to buy them. So we were trying to figure out how to automate different parts of the process. And so you're looking for, you're going to the MLS or agents are sending you brochures and they have photos with details on them. But in every situation, I'd have to look at it, or one of my analysts would have to look at it. And so what I wanted to do was try to replace that process, which it's almost unheard of. But a previous life, I was an aerospace engineer in a black room, and we did some really cool stuff with computer vision with drones 70,000 feet up. So what I did was kind of took some of that conceptual ideas and implemented that in our office. And so basically we developed a system that was actually looking at properties with the photos, with satellite imagery, et cetera, and then taking that data and then just basically distilling it down to something that I'd be interested in. So I didn't actually have to look at it at first. And I'll give you some examples. So we could look at photos and see what type of cabinets, what type of flooring, what type of paint and windows, things like that. So we can actually have a list of what is actually not renovated, something that's in poor condition. And so those are the ones we're looking for. We're looking at stuff that was in poor condition. We'd correlate that to a value, and then we'd say, okay, this listing makes sense because that value correlates with the condition it's in. And then the software would also look at what was at the top of the market, looking at, okay, that has really nice finishes. This has granite countertops, shaker cabinets, et cetera. And that's correlated with a higher value. So then we could look at that margin and say, okay, is this worth looking at? So that all happens before it even gets to my desk in the software. So that's how we automated one part of our process.
And this is how you're able to look at 200 to 300 deals a day now.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's really cool because, before I'm sure this was much of a manual process. I'm sure there had to be eyes on the home. I'm sure there had to be people going out to talk to folks, and I'm sure it can be a lot more of an automated process now. So,
just one more thing to add. I think a different perspective of looking at AI, not just in everything that we do for our clients, but I think AI is also obviously, changing the entire startup industry in a way that innovation really grows exponentially. So, think of founders that before, to get to a platform that you can sell to a client, you needed at least a $2 million investment. Today, an 18-year-old or even younger can do some magic with ChatGPT and get the applications out there for nothing, right? So I think that's good news because that's, they might not build viable companies right away, but I think the rate of innovation will grow exponentially. And just like startups disrupt big corporations, I think those little companies or apps or agents will disrupt, startups. So
it's probably worth mentioning too. I think we need to stop referring to AI as a category It's not. It's embedded in everything that we do. 47% of pitch decks in the PropTech ecosystem for 2024 had AI mentioned in the first 2 pages. There's not that many startups out there leveraging AI, I can tell you that right now. So we just need to accept that.
How many of those pitch decks were written by AI? Probably
Well, I mean, I got my first call from an AI real estate agent today. I think just, you could tell a little bit it's getting better and better, but, there's news out there where, AI agents are now executing VC deals for startups from start to finish. So we are seeing a big change, and we'll kind of leave it there on the AI side. I know it's kind of embedded in everything. Everyone has added it to their name, but there's some cool things coming from it as well. Maybe we'll just drop it down to, some advice now for the room. You guys have all had a lot of experience in this space, have founded companies, sold companies. What is some advice you would give to startups trying to break into the prop tech space in 2025 and beyond?
I can lead off on this one. So I always take things from a very product oriented position, and one of my favorite things that I always used to like to do was if I was working on a feature at Redfin or at Approved or now at RetroRate, I would always do it. I would build the feature and I'd prioritize features based on how angry it would make the status quo. So case in point, if you're going to release a feature at Redfin, you would say well, how cranky is this going to make the competing real estate agents out there? Because if it makes them upset, it means that I've really struck a nerve, and that I'm really striking at the heart of something that maybe they hold dear. So in the case of just simply putting MLS information up online, people didn't want that because the agents wanted to be the gatekeepers for MLS information, and they fought tooth and nail. And there was a Department of Justice lawsuit, led by a group of people that really wanted this up there. So I always say that if you're starting a company, go and look and say, well, who are the entrenched players? What do they hold dear, and what would really just frankly piss them off if you released? And if you go after that kind of thing, arguably don't be a jerk about it, but if you go after those kinds of things, you're probably striking at something that someone's going to truly find insanely useful.
Yeah, I think on that theme, kind of macro topics, there's a strategy framework that we oblige to at Snap called the Playing to Win framework. And it's kind of two-pronged, right? You have to know maniacally where you will play and how you will win. And this has been a focus of mine at this company and previous others, where we will play, the exact target audience, our exact ICP, and where we're dedicating 100%. And then we can go up market, down market, sideways, whatever we want, once we figure out exactly where we will play. And then on the how we will win side, understanding what we have core competencies in and what other elements of our strategy we're going to potentially partner out or go buy. So we won't do everything well. And the main thing I see in PropTech on where people go wrong is that they want to do it all. They want to be best of breed in everything, and that's impossible. You have to partner certain things out. I don't care if it's assumable loans or fraud detection. There's going to be certain elements that you're just not going to do very well. And so being able to say, hey, that's okay, and I'm going to go find somebody else that is early on in your strategy is probably going to result in a positive outcome.
Yeah, I think that was another point to talk about tonight was, how have partnerships helped you guys really expand and grow your businesses? Kyle talked about a few of them, but if anybody else wants to add any more, please do.
I'd like to add something about the advice to anybody starting up right now. I look at this in a practical way. Just start small. Start small with the innovation, the thing you're creating, the cork in a wine bottle, right? You don't have to have the best wine in the world or the best bottle, but be the best cork. And then think big market. So small product, whatever that is, big market. That's what I would advise for anybody. Don't try to go big. Eat that elephant one bite at a time, right?
What about an edible cork?
Innovation. It's not a bad idea.
I think we're all saying similar things. One thing that when we were set to build a Bluma, we didn't want to build. We saw the end-to-end. It's to build an end-to-end. It's very hard. So we wanted to build one thing specific and be the best at it. And I think that's a good advice. And then when you do that, you also need to build your product this way. So we build it all microservices based architecture, connecting APIs. We consume our own APIs. I call it, we eat our own dog food. So our UX actually calls all those APIs at the back end. And so, connecting to others, I think that's really the future. Everyone will be best at one thing, and connecting everything together. I think all those old style applications and platforms out there that do everything, they're mediocre at what they do, right? Rather than like people that specialize in what they do. So, just like everyone's said here, I think focus. Another thing that I will add is patience, and also like, know when to shift when you need to. Like we launched the company, the product actually was launched January 2020, 2 months before something big happened, and like the entire industry went blank. But what we realized that even though there were not new originations, actually lenders wanted to watch their existing portfolio, and that was a huge opportunity. So we shifted from origination to portfolio monitoring, portfolio surveillance, and that now is our biggest product, right? So, being able to make a shift when needed, but build the product flexible enough to do other things and focus.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess maybe any final roadblocks you guys see coming up, because I think it's always good to talk about what the potential is, what's really cool, what's coming up. But where are some of the potential roadblocks? I know we've talked about interest rates a little bit, but what else do you guys foresee coming up this year that might be an obstacle in front of you?
I think the biggest threat for us are the unknown unknowns, and for us right now, that's probably regulation. It's moving faster, the advancements of artificial intelligence than the government can catch up with. So I'm not sure where it's going to go, and whether or not we work with lobbyists or groups on Capitol Hill, it's impossible to have a straight line of sight into how that's going to affect our business from a macroeconomic perspective. So that's probably the biggest threat that I see right now to Snap and PropTech, more broadly.
Yeah, and fundamentally too, whatever rules and regulations you have in place January 19th are going to be fundamentally different come noon on January 20th, potentially. So, keeping up and keeping pace with what's happening, we already talked about this a little bit in terms of like acceptance of these new technologies, especially as they're applied to the housing industry, one of the most regulated industries, on the planet. It's aside from banking. So, and they're so closely related that it's hard to extract one from the other.
Yeah, I think, it's actually regulation prohibits like innovation. In our space specifically, when I got into it, I didn't come from real estate or commercial real estate or lending, which is sometimes good because the art of the possible. When I sat with users for the first time, they, what they wanted is like so simple is, really the cliche of wanting a faster horse, where that you can do so much more, right? So, but today, and what shocked me and still does is that, banks like in commercial real estate, like you lend up to 65, 75% LTV. So there's still like a loan to value. So there's still like you're taking risks, but there's still enough way to play with that. And so at least make the process, you can maintain, like obviously we don't want lenders, we know what happened before, to lend like 100%. But if you're already limiting yourself to 75%, or the regulation limits you to 75%, at least within that, being able to automate, being able to like make things faster. And eventually what the benefit, who will benefit from it will be really the buyers, the borrowers, because today the cost to originate is so expensive that and it can really be simplified, and there will be some risk, but the risk is still within a framework that can work. So I think we all say the same.
Yeah, well, I'll shift gears a little bit. I think adoption is going to be the biggest barrier. I think, as a couple of you have mentioned before, realtors are really trying to hold on to their silo, their value. So they're trying to keep that. But then you have a mortgage tech that's coming out. You have a lot of different technologies that are out there that are taking people's jobs in essence. And so there's a lot of people that are going to protect themselves from that. But I think with adoption, you're going to have people who are really focused on trust, which I think comes down to, for us as PropTech companies, is honesty. So I think you mentioned like one company, price fixing. We have, I was working on a deal with Zillow a couple of years ago. They were going to be using our valuation software. And they came back at some point. They tried to gouge us, and then we ended up getting an argument about how amazing they were and how they had 100 engineers in Ukraine and they had the best systems and whatnot. And 3 months later, those two executives that I was working with resigned. And then a month later, their iBuyer platform collapsed and they lost tons. Like $200 million or something. I forget the amount. But and SoftBank is still coming back for more, by the way. But anyway, so I think being honest is going to help develop trust, and then the trust is going to help develop adoption. And so I think that's going to be our biggest, in my opinion, barrier.
Yeah, no, that's true. I would say that our biggest competitor is like Excel spreadsheets. So everyone wants to be in Excel, and even though, like, trying to say like you don't do your taxes in Excel, but like eventually, even with everything that we do, they want it then to go into Excel. So it's like that's for me as like head of product, like this is like something that I want to make it like valuable enough to stay in Bloomberg so that they never want to use Excel again. But that's a challenge.
Well, thank you guys so much for everything that you guys have shared tonight. We have about 5 minutes left, actually. I just wanted to see if anyone from the audience here had a question or comment that they wanted to share in the last couple minutes.
Yeah, a question. So you said that PropTech, it's in the early days, but we see tons of new startups coming up in that space. On the other side, we have all the incumbent, the large PMS system that does everything. But do you still see technology gap or opportunities in the PropTech space?
I think so. I think you mentioned the property management software and the PMS, and I'll give you a good example, right? We created this fraud detection category. Now, 3 of the top 7 property management softwares are leveraging Snapped as a back-end white label solution to power their fraud detection component. So I think you're going to see opportunities like that. We focus like the resident lifecycle in 3 different areas, right? Pre-lease, during lease, and post-lease. A lot of people are playing in the pre-lease side of things. That's where Snap actually operates. There's been a ton of innovation during the lease and resident experience. But then, for example, when somebody goes to move out, it's like a nightmare. Collections, all of that there hasn't been any innovation in decades. And so I think we're going to see like that, for example, is ripe for someone to modernize the move-out process or the eviction filing process, for example. And so I think there is a ton of runway still, just finding the pockets where there's a lack of innovation and investing heavily in there to refine and overall make a process more efficient.
If I may as well, I think if we're looking at just PropTech gaps in general, is that the question? So I think at some point we can use our imagination, where it's like, where could we be in the next 20, 50 years? And like just one idea would be real-time real estate transactions, where you can actually buy a home in seconds. Right, a couple clicks of a button. If you start to think about that, just as like a conceptually, what sort of elements in that process can you fill, right? And you automate those processes, and you, again, trust and et cetera, and all those things. So if you use your imagination, we can actually see very big gaps in opportunities. I know it's hard to like see that far in the future, but it's there, And so, and if you build it that way, then you can actually build something, small that's useful today as well.
Yes.
What do you see in the PropTech in the real estate insurance business? I mean, my insurance went up 50% this year, even before the big fires. I'm fortunate that I can afford it, but what do you see in the homeowner insurance business with the PropTech?
I can answer just from one perspective. We actually thought about like bringing it up as a topic, but we had so many other things to talk about. I think that's obviously a big problem. We see it from the lending side. Like the insurance rates can really change the entire cash flow of a property and ability to pay the loan, right? So I think there's much more scrutiny on that now from lenders, and I think that personally it's not like something that I'm an expert on, but I think that there should be a way. I know that the way that those rates are determined are not very scientific, right? They're they have some rules that might apply or not. I happen to live also on close to a region, and that's my property taxes also went up tremendously. So I think there's actually bringing together, that's an opportunity. I think there is an opportunity to do something in that space and really look at data and make it more scientific so that the rates will go down. Because I know actually people now don't even there are people that can't insure their home, and it's just uninsured. So I mean, even in San Diego actually a lot.
Well, isn't it fundamentally that the rates themselves are just they're not market rates? They're driven by regulation to be this artificial price, and they can't actually price in real risk. They can't price in, and so everyone, basically you just spread the cost across everyone universally, even though there are in fact like big climate risk models that will show, hey, actually this maybe isn't a safe place to live. You should probably have higher rates versus like maybe someplace over here who has to pay the same amount because like regulation won't allow them to price that in.
Yeah.
So I would say to fix the insurance market, regulation kind of has to get out of the way a little bit.
For sure.
Because I think the whole concept of risk has been disrupted, right? Actuaries have never been smarter, and like with the AI tools that they have, and why would
And the data hasn't ever been better.
Why would you underwrite bad deals in bad markets or otherwise and issue bad policies that are going to break the model? And so you can't really blame them when premiums are going through the roof. And so I think the only route is for regulation to take effect and for government intervention, or else none of us will be able to insure our homes 10 years from now.
Yeah, no, that's a very great point. We'll go back with the gentleman in the back first, and then.
Okay. Speaking of regulation, what do you think the impact is going to be in California for the new rules regulating the relationship between buyers and their real estate agent for when they want to go look at a home?
So this is specifically the NAR ruling, so the Department of Justice versus NAR. So just so you know, so basically the way that the real estate agents are compensated, traditionally it was like 6% off of the seller. It would go to the seller's agent, and that was split for the buyer. And the ruling was around how can you advertise the rate at which the buyer was going to get, like, and what was that split? And is it actually legal to allow a seller to have to pay for the buyer's agent's commission? And so they effectively said, no, you can't do that. You just literally, you can't do that. And a lot of people said, well, what's going to happen? Is the buyer going to have to pay the commission for that? I think if you talk about an area where there's going to be a lot of PropTech innovation, I think this is one of those areas. Because specifically, you now need to have an agreement in place as a buyer with your buy-side agent to go out. You also need to potentially put in like a compensation agreement in place. And is that going to be based on the number of homes you see? Is that going to be based on like, I mean, there's so, I think this is an area that there's a lot, there could be a lot of innovation on this one. So I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, there could be a lot. There could be a lot of changes.
You still have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question just about regulation, whether any of you are active in helping change some of the regulations, because you on a macro level, federal, state, county, local, are affected by regulations as to whether your business is going to be successful. You're also on the other side affected by infrastructure. And in many cases, the data that you need isn't always accessible. Can you just kind of quickly address that? I know we need to.
It's probably our last question.
That's a boring topic to end on, but I'll humor it for sure. So, and it's not meant to any, and no fault of the question. So we're heavily involved with FCRA, for example, on Capitol Hill. You know, the Federal Credit Reporting Agency. It monitors everything to do with apartment applications and has oversight into the mortgage sector as well. And that's an area, I think, where there's been a lot of ambiguity with regards to the use of artificial intelligence for decisioning outcomes, specific all across lending as well as the apartment application process. And so, yeah, like we're heavily engaged. I was on Capitol Hill last March, meeting with senators and things of that nature, trying to understand where the regulation is headed and ultimately what we can do to positively enact change, not just for the clients that we serve, but also the applicants, the 2 million renters across our platform that use us on a day-to-day basis.
Well, awesome, everyone. Well, Kyle, Andy, Tal, Rich, thank you guys so much for being a part of this discussion tonight and for sharing all your amazing insights. Thank you all for joining us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to come up and chat with the folks here afterwards.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.